breaking down every Patriots draft selection here on PatsCast. Let's go.
PatsCast called it big day in town. Will Campbell's here, laying dudes down. Short arms, whatever.
Welcome to PatsCast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Good to be with you. You know, every fan views their team's draft with rose-colored glasses before reality begins to set in. So I'm going to say everything here with a grain of salt, but I have never felt more confident coming out of an NFL draft than this one that Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf just conducted. And I'm going to start by issuing a formal apology to Elliott Wolf. And I've been higher on Elliott Wolf more than most Patriots fans, just because a lot of smart football people say he's a really smart guy. And I, of course, like many Patriots fans, especially these last 6 months, have wavered a little bit on that, saying, well, the proof is in the pudding, and I'm still seeing pudding mix. Well, Elliott Wolf, this last week, really changed tune. First off, and he did this a few months ago as well, but was willing to admit last offseason's failures with the draft. And, you know, even went on to say, like, we had a lot more structure this year that we didn't have last year, and was willing to admit their faults. As I said, we've heard just how smart Elliott Wolf is, and we've all asked the question, really? I haven't seen it. But now we're finally starting to see it. And, you know, sometimes smart, creative people need an accountability partner, an accountability buddy, as South Park would say, to be the best that they can be. And honestly, I think Elliott Wolf just needed a kick in the ass from Mike Vrabel to get the best of him. You know, Alexander the Great was an erratic leader in his teens until he was mentored by Aristotle and became Alexander the Great. I guess in this scenario, Elliott Wolf is Alexander the Great and Mike Vrabel is Aristotle. But Elliott Wolf and company, they got very creative. They traded back multiple times, piling up extra assets. They traded up at one point to take Joshua Farmer. They got rid of a late 7th round draft pick to move up a few spots to get Farmer, then eventually traded back again and got a better late 7th round pick, creating arbitrage as teams got more desperate. Just absolutely brilliant work by Elliott Wolf, Vrabel, Stretch John Stryker, Ryan Cowden, Alonzo Highsmith, Matt Groh, assuming he's still wandering around there. Just a really good job. And as I said, Elliott Wolf admitted they lacked structure last year, and this group did create structure. And to be honest, they looked like they were having fun doing it. Elliott Wolf seemed far more confident at the podium than we've seen in past months, in past years. You know, it looked like a collaborative dynamic in the draft room, but clearly Vrabel was the figurehead. And I guess there were some disagreements there that Elliott Wolf talked about after day 2. I guess they had a disagreement on who they wanted to take early in the second round. There was a player on the board that they were debating drafting over Travion Henderson, the running back that they took out of Ohio State. And I guess that player was taken off the board, so they didn't have to formally have that debate, but they had a healthy conversation there and ultimately settled on the right player. Now, if I had to guess, it was Jaden Higgins, the big-bodied ex-wide receiver who came off the board just before the Patriots selected. So I think there was a bit of a debate there between Elliott Wolf, Mike Vrabel, and company, whether or not to draft Travion Henderson, the running back, or the big wide receiver, Jaden Higgins. That decision was made for them. But disagreements, healthy debates, good collaboration. I think they found a perfect combo here of what the collaboration that Kraft was looking for between Drake Maye and Elliott Wolf last year, and the accountability that Mike Vrabel brings as the figurehead. I really think this could work, and I think we are all skeptical. Too many cooks in the kitchen in the front office there in New England. Is Mike Vrabel going to be the key decision maker? I think he is, but the dynamic works with Stretch, with Alonzo Highsmith still around, with Matt Groh still around, adding Cowden. I mean, really good draft. So let's get to the selections here because I couldn't have mocked this better. I did a mock draft last week, and I like what the Patriots did better than the mock I made when it's really just fantasy land. Usually, the actual draft isn't better than the mock draft, but I think the Patriots did a better job here. And that starts with their 4th overall pick, their first pick. Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU, of course, 6'6", 319 pounds. We've talked about Will Campbell a lot, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but we know they filled the only glaring hole other than kicker on the roster here. And we've been talking about the struggles at left tackle in New England since 2019. And they finally addressed it. They have upgraded that position, and it's going to be the best we've seen in New England since at least the 2018 season, when they tried to run with Isaiah Wynn. He got hurt, and Trent Brown came in and filled in, and they won the Super Bowl back when Trent Brown actually cared. So we're going to see a real upgrade there. We know the concerns. We know the red flags. Short arms, wingspan, tight shoulders. Has the shortest wingspan measured from a tackle at the combine since 2011. Yeah, we get it, but the film at the very least is the second best in the class. Josh Simmons might have the best film in the class from Ohio State, but he's coming off of a major injury, and we don't know what his future is going to look like. He ended up going to Kansas City. They took the best overall tackle in this draft and started all 3 years, including as a freshman, high character guy, leader in the locker room, willing to, quote, fight and die for Drake Maye. I was ready to run through a brick wall after his draft interview. When he teared up, it was like watching the end of Rudy. Really good stuff there, and saying, I'm willing to fight and die for my quarterback. Love it. Exactly what you want to hear. If it works out, you have a starting left tackle for a decade, and a guy that Drake Maye can really trust long term. I'm not saying he's going to be all pro potential, but maybe Pro Bowl potential. And this guy, his head's in the right spot. He compensates for what he doesn't have, the long arms. He's able to work on his technique in a way that allows him to play at a high level. That's his ceiling, right? Is you have your starting left tackle, a Pro Bowl left tackle for 10 plus years that Drake Maye can rely on, and we can stop talking about the left tackle position. His floor, he's still a Pro Bowl caliber left guard, maybe even a right tackle if it doesn't work out on the far left side. You can work with those limitations when you move to the non-blind side. So that's his floor, is it just doesn't work out at left tackle. He's serviceable there, still an upgrade from what we saw with Vidarian Lowe, what we saw with late Trent Brown. Still an upgrade there. That's his floor, and his ceiling is you have and he moves over to guard. That's his floor. His ceiling is you have a left tackle for years to come. This was the right selection, not the sexy selection. I know we all talked about Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland, who went ahead of Tyler Warren, or Tet McMillan, or Hope Carter, or Hunter Fell. They made the right selection here. And then we can just shut up about the left tackle spot for a little while. See how it plays out. And if it doesn't work out, he's your left guard of the future or your right tackle. And you go pay for an expensive one next year or use your first round pick on a better left tackle, because this was a weaker draft class. So, no issues with the Will Campbell selection. Then the second round, Patriots, bit of a surprise here, take running back Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, 5'10", 202 pounds. Stunned that they took a running back this early. Again, it seems like that's where the debate was. If Jaden Higgins is still there, do you take him over Travion Henderson? Didn't have to make that decision. Higgins was off the board. So they went running back with their second pick. But this shows that Mike Vrabel's priorities are similar to what they were in Tennessee when they really dominated on the ground with Derrick Henry, because they had some limitations at quarterback with Ryan Tannehill. He does have a real quarterback in Drake Maye, so I don't think it's going to look exactly like that. But you're bringing in a running back who obviously can run the football, highly versatile, tough player who's willing to block. Henderson's blocking is next level. Rookies do not come in the league at running back and block like this. Can pick up blitzes. He's just an excellent blocker and a guy that you're not going to take him this early if you don't eventually have him as your 3-down workhorse back. And that's what Elliott Wolf said, is that they see him as a 3-down back. Now, I don't think, at least initially, this is going to impact Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson's job security. It will shrink their workload significantly, but I probably still see Ramondre as the lead power back. Gibson, anything could happen with him. Hell, he might be better than Ramondre Stevenson. But really, I see Travion Henderson starting as a third down, blocking, pass-catching back, filling that James White-type role that they've been missing since White left the team or retired. I think that works out for a year, and then you move him into your primary back role. Again, he's a great blocker, adept at picking up the blitz, explosive, 4.4 speed, NFL ready on day one, which early running back should be. But he's also used to the running back by committee approach that I expect the Patriots to take this season. Ohio State also had Judkins, his teammate at running back, who was actually taken ahead of Travion Henderson, even though I think Henderson is a better running back. Those two kind of handled the load there at Ohio State, so that's not going to be anything unusual for him, but I do eventually see him being their primary back, but he will fill that James White role very quickly. Overall, this is a solid selection. I just don't know if the positional value is there at running back this early. They could have taken a running back in the third round. The guy I liked was Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. How much of a difference is it taking the third best running back, which I think Travion Henderson is, as opposed to the seventh best running back on the most dependent position in the field? I don't know. There were a lot of good edge rushers available. Azaraku from Boston College, they could have taken there, but instead opted for running back. But clearly, Vrabel and company value running back more than most coaches, most front offices did. But either way, they got a top 30 prospect at 38th overall. So even though you may not have the positional value there still is value there, taking the 30th best player on the board at 38. Was frankly shocked. I thought he would go in the first round, and I said he's probably the third best running back. He might be the second one. I mean, it's clearly Ashton Genty, but Travion Henderson would be a first-round running back in most drafts. Even though most teams don't take running backs that early, usually there are one or two teams each year that does it. This was a deep running back draft, so I think he would have been a first-rounder. So a ton of value there that the Patriots got. But like I said, I was skeptical about taking a running back that early. They got Kyle Williams, the wide receiver out of Washington State, with their next pick early in the third round. Frankly, I would have been happy if the Patriots had taken Kyle Williams at 38th overall instead of Henderson. So they ended up getting both players. So that makes me a little bit more comfortable taking the running back earlier than expected. So a ton of value here. You're looking at a mid-second round talent that they got early in the third at a position where the Patriots have zero separators outside of Demario Douglas and now Stephon Diggs. 4.4 speed, averaged more than 13 yards per catch last season, had 14 touchdowns, 1,200 receiving yards. But what makes him the most valuable isn't just his speed, it's his release and separation. He had a 73% success rate last season versus man coverage, and also made life very difficult against Travis Hunter when they faced off against each other. I'd show you the clip, but YouTube wouldn't be happy about it. But there's a clip of him beating Hunter vertically, and it all was because of his initial release, throwing off Travis Hunter. Now, their speed were basically identical, Travis Hunter and Kyle Williams, but because he had that release that threw Travis Hunter on his heels, he was able to get a touchdown very easily and get about 4 to 5 yards of separation there. I mean, Travis Hunter, a lot of people say, is a better corner than he is a wide receiver, can start and be an instant top 5, top 10 impact corner right away. Kyle Williams was taking him to lunch when those two faced off. Now, is he your big body X wide receiver that we've been talking about for years on this podcast? No, but he can play X. He lined up on the outside 70% of the time this past year. But you can also move him around. He lined up in the slot 25% of the time. I'm guessing the other 5% was, maybe they put him at halfback or something. But that's what they need. Josh McDaniels can still move him around, but he can play on the outside even if he isn't the tallest receiver. He plays a lot bigger than he looks. But this player is good enough to start right away, particularly with this offense. Not sure we'll ever see that 6'4" outside receiver ever again in New England. But they now have weapons for Drake Maye. They now potentially have 3 elite separators with Demario Douglas, Stephon Diggs, and Kyle Williams. Not to mention, they signed Mac Hollins this offseason. Not the fastest, but he has some size. Kayshon Boutte's still around. Kendrick Bourne is still around. One of those guys, maybe both of those guys, are eventually gone. And you have the development of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Now, I'm a bit discouraged about Jalen Polk after last season, but Javon Baker was always going to be a project. Like, I did not expect him to see the field all that much last year. Sounds like Mike Vrabel's putting his arm around him. I would say Polk might be on the chopping block, not necessarily Baker, because Baker, I think, has a much higher ceiling there. There's some attitude problems and character concerns, which Polk wasn't supposed to have, but Polk was a much bigger distraction than Baker was. So, I don't know. I still... You can maybe get something out of Polk, but I might stick Baker on the roster and see what he can do in year 2. But it is a crowded receiving room. That's part of the reason I didn't think the Patriots were going to prioritize receiver that much, and they didn't. They only took one. But they got a real separator, and that's something that's been missing in New England for quite some time, really since, like, Julian Edelman. I guess, Jacoby Myers was a good route runner, so he could separate, just wasn't very fast. But they haven't had that separator other than Demario Douglas on occasion. So you now got 3 guys that make life very difficult for defenses. A tall guy in Matt Collins, and then lots of depth with Bourne, Booty, Baker, and Polk. So happy with that receiving core. Yeah, it would have been nice to get T. Higgins or trade for A.J. Brown. Maybe that's in the cards down the road. But overall, adding Stephon Diggs and a guy like Kyle Williams and Matt Collins, Patriots have done an excellent job bolstering that receiving room, and it added some versatility that Josh McDaniels can get really creative with. So with their next selection, bit of a surprise here to some, but the Patriots took Jared Wilson, the center out of the University of Georgia, 6'3", 310 pounds. Overall, Patriots got the best center in the draft with this selection. Now, I think Seth McLaughlin is a better center than Jared Wilson. Won the Remington Award, which goes to the best center in college football, but he's coming off of an Achilles injury. So you factor that in, Jared Wilson is the best center in the draft. Same thing with like Will Campbell and Josh Simmons. That's why they leapfrog those 2 players. But all SEC second team, 0 sacks allowed last season, 6 pressures on 511 pass blocking snaps. Also has even more experience at guard than center, so could potentially compete for both jobs. Elliott Wolf confirmed that after the Patriots made this selection, so he will compete at left guard with Layden Robinson and Cole Strange to take that starting role. He will also compete at center with Garrett Bradbury, the free agent that they signed for cheap. If it works out, he'll start, but if it doesn't, they may just cut him. It's only going to cost them like $3 million. Cole Strange is factored in that competition at center as well. And of course, Ben Brown, who did a serviceable job at the position, but don't really like him as a long-term center. But centers are typically not taken this high in the draft, so he does have the talent to start right away. And, I would predict that he wins one of those jobs, right? I think he's, Cole Strange was allegedly a first-round talent, but has been a bit of a disappointment. I think he can beat him out at left guard. Layden Robinson showed some potential at the end of last season, so maybe that's the real competition, but I see him winning the center job more than anything. But you still got value taking a center this early. According to Andrew Callahan, he fell about 20 to 30 spots later than the projection. So he's definitely a better pass blocker than a run blocker, but he still had an above average grade from Pro Football Focus. High football IQ, constantly seeks work, a leader at Georgia making line calls in a pro-style offense. Elite lateral agility. He was in the 99th percentile among centers with his 40 time of a 4.84 for a big guy. That's pretty good. Ranked second overall out of 622 centers since 1987 with his RAS, relative athletic score. So you are getting a freak here that's either going to be your long-term starting left guard or your long-term starting center, in my prediction. But more importantly, you're getting more protection for Drake Maye in addition to Will Campbell. He added Morgan Moses, a durable, experienced, veteran, effective right tackle. Will Campbell, the best available left tackle, plugs the biggest position of need at a high-value position. And of course, Jared Wilson, potentially your long-term left guard or center. That's quite the offseason haul on the offensive line. The Patriots have done an excellent job rebuilding this, and hopefully we can finally shut up about it. Because honestly, it felt like most of the Brady years, there were kind of the middle years with the losses in the Giants Super Bowl where The O-line Brady was getting hit pretty hard, even like the fourth Super Bowl, trying to get past Denver and their defense. Their offensive line was a little shaky there, but for the most part, during the 20-year dynasty in New England, we were not talking about the offensive line that much. And it's one of those, units where you don't talk about it unless it's not working. It's like first base in baseball. If they don't catch the ball, you're going to point it out. If they do, you don't even notice it. So hopefully we don't even notice anything anymore, and the Patriots finally have a good offensive line, which was their bread and butter for the majority of the 20 years that they won all those Super Bowls. So with the next selection, the Patriots took Craig Woodson, safety out of the University of California, 6 foot, 200 pounds. This is the first and only reach, in my opinion, of the draft. They selected him at 106th overall. According to the consensus big board, he was ranked 188th overall. So the Patriots could have potentially got him 2 rounds later, although I'm sure Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf disagree with that. But this guy was drafted because of his experience and versatility. He's 24 years old, played 5 full seasons in college with the COVID years factor in, plays over the deep half, defends the slot, and also as a single high deep safety. He's a tough tackler, explosive downhill runner, limits yards after the catch, times blitzes well, has enough size to cover 50-50 balls against tight ends. Overall, he does seem like a better fit at strong safety than he does for free safety. Free safety is kind of one of the missing holes on this roster, although the Patriots certainly have enough DB depth there to fill it. But he is expected to compete for the free safety spot. He has 4.45 speed, which is good enough, but you prefer him to be closer to 4.4 so he can keep up with some of those speedier receivers, but is very reactive out there in center field. I don't want to knock him for running a 4.45. I said that yesterday on the podcast, and people are like, 4.45 is pretty fast. I get that, certainly, but when you're going up against 4.38 guys, slot receivers, and you have to pick them up in center field, that's tough to do if you're only a 4.45 guy. But overall in his tape, he's done a pretty good job at doing that. And, if it doesn't work out at free safety, he's a potential depth piece at strong safety that can challenge Kyle Duggar, who I really was not happy that the Patriots re-signed last year, and as we saw this past season, really underperformed. And of course, Jabril Peppers, who I think fits the violent mold that Mike Vrabel is looking for, but there certainly are some character concerns there. So I think this raises the alarm bells a little bit for Kyle Duggar, but overall, I think he is going to ultimately compete for the free safety job, but could be a good depth piece at strong safety. Smart, high IQ, experienced, versatile football player who can also play special teams as well. He's good enough to be a starter, but really depends on if he can win the free safety job or if they can find a way to squeeze him in at strong safety. But love this selection, just not the value early in the 4th round. You probably could have waited a little bit longer, but do love the value with the next selection. Joshua Farmer, defensive tackle out of Florida State, 6'3", 305 pounds. Another 4th rounder. This was the only trade up that the Patriots did during the draft. So Vrabel and Wolf clearly coveted him. High value selection. They took him at 137th overall. Was 86th overall on the consensus big board. So got a ton of value there. Has the size and length you'd want from a defensive tackle, but also extremely athletic. 112-inch broad jump. That puts him in the 87th percentile. And at 305 pounds, he moves like a 250-pound linebacker. It really is incredible. High ceiling, low floor player, capable of starting right away. Doesn't mean he will, but he is capable of that. It's just the Patriots have a lot of talent on that defensive line. He actually spent 30 minutes chatting up Milton Williams during his top 30 visit, so who he will presumably line up next to for years to come. Overall, I'm expecting him to play in a rotational defensive line role with the potential for lots of playing time if Christian Barmore's health is an issue with the blood clots and all that. As much as we've heard, Christian Barmore looks like he'll be ready to go, but blood clots are always iffy. You never know how that's going to work out. It ended Chris Bosch's career. David Andrews had it for a year and came back and had plenty of impactful seasons afterwards. So hopefully Christian Barmore can come back and be that guy. He came back a little prematurely this past season, so with a little bit more time off, that is a hell of a lineup between him, Joshua Farmer, and Milton Williams. Patriots have a pass rush now that was non-existent last year. And Farmer is certainly an upgrade from Jacqueline Roy, who I really like, but he's a lot more athletic with a similar frame to Roy. But believe it or not, Joshua Farmer was not the highest value selection. That was actually Braden Swinson, the edge rusher out of LSU. 6'4", 255 pounds. I was talking about the Patriots taking Braden Swinson with their early 4th round pick, seeing him as a late 2nd, early 3rd round value, and they got him in the middle of the 5th. So 71st on the consensus big board. The Patriots got him at more than double, 146th overall. Really don't know why this guy slipped. I really don't know. He is somewhat lean, 255 pounds, but has enough size to be an every down player, not just a 3rd down specialist, even if initially he is a 3rd down specialist. Just to give you a comparison, Braden Swinson's at 255 pounds as an edge rusher. Josh Uche, who was a 3rd down edge rush specialist, is just 240 pounds. So he has 15 pounds on him and can probably put on a little bit more. So he may be a 3rd down specialist initially, but he has the capability of being an every down player. Finished 4th last season in the SEC in pressures. Led LSU in sacks and tackles for a loss. And, of course, was Will Campbell's teammate. And those two competed against each other in practice a lot. So that's highly valuable. There's going to be some continuity there for both players while they make this tough transition from Baton Rouge in college to the Colt of Foxborough in the NFL. Those two will be going up against each other in practice for years to come. And that's just going to make the development a little bit easier for both of them. High IQ pass rusher, disciplined, high character guy who went from a 3-star recruit to 2nd team all SEC. So noticing a common theme here, right? These are culture guys. These are high IQ, high character, usually experienced players that, these are not typically 3-year players other than Will Campbell. They've been around for a little while. That's what Mike Vrabel values, and that's the new culture in New England. Similar to the old culture, but Belichick let that slip a little bit in the later years, and then Drake Maye put the nail in the coffin on that one. So Mike Vrabel is trying to restore that, and all of these selections fit that mold that he's looking for. So with their next selection, the Patriots took in the 6th round, Andres Borregales, the kicker out of the University of Miami, 5'11", 200 pounds. This could be considered a reach early in the 6th round, but he's the best kicker in the draft, and you probably weren't getting him waiting until the 7th round. That's typically where the best kickers go, somewhere around the middle 6th round, and Patriots took him early in the 6th round, because otherwise they would have had to trade up, or maybe someone would have taken him right away. And I believe the next kicker was taken off the board fairly quickly after that. So this was the right decision overall. He made 18 of 19 field goals last season. The only miss happened in week 1, so has quite the streak going at the moment. Powerful foot, accurate from 50-plus yards. His career long is 56, so he hasn't been asked to do anything beyond that, but as far as we can tell, he can make long field goals. Mentally tough guy, considered a clutch kicker who's made more than 95% of what's considered big kicks, clutch kicks, if you will. Looked up to Adam Vinatieri growing up. Would expect him to easily win the job over John Parker Romo. That would be a disaster. Otherwise, John Parker Romo has a good foot. He's just not that accurate. Only concern with Andres Borregales is he has no experience kicking the ball, not just in the elements, but in cold weather. He didn't just play college in South Florida. He played high school in South Florida. So that's going to be a bit of an adjustment for him, and we'll see if that foot's as powerful come early January. But overall, Patriots got the best kicker in the draft, and that's really what they needed to do, because that was the only glaring hole on the roster at this point. Next selection, Marcus Bryant. So now we're moving here into the 7th round. Patriots had 3 picks in the 7th round with all the different trades that they made. Marcus Bryant is the tackle out of the University of Missouri. 6'7", 320 pounds. So with all the concerns about Will Campbell's arms and shoulders, this guy makes up for that. 34 and 5/8 inch arms. Ran a 4.97 40. That's pretty good for a massive tackle. Actually has a ton of experience for a guy who could be considered a developmental player. Played both left tackle and right tackle in college, 4 years at SMU before transferring to the University of Missouri his final year. But he started all 13 games at left tackle at Missouri. And the reason why that's significant is, who is the other tackle at Missouri? That was Armin Membu, the second tackle taken in this draft, just behind Will Campbell, selected by the New York Jets. He lined up opposite him at right tackle. This guy was the preferred blindside tackle over Armin Membu. Now, a lot of Armin Membu's, stock boost had to do with the fact that he's a raw player, more of a combine guy with a higher ceiling, but Marcus Bryant was considered Missouri's leader at the tackle position. So, yeah, would I rather have Armin Membu to Marcus Bryant? Certainly, but he is the leader. He started at left tackle, and, there's a chance he could develop into potentially an NFL starter at the tackle spot. That said, he's a 7th rounder for a reason. He gave up 18 pressures last season. So everything I said about this guy sounds like he should have been a 1st-round talent until I got to this last bullet. He gave up 18 pressures last season. So has a lot of size, 6'7", 320 pounds, has the arm length, and started at left tackle over Armin Membu, who they preferred on the right side. See him as a depth piece, a swing tackle who could maybe be your future starting right tackle if all goes well, and it doesn't go well for Caden Wallace, who I would assume at this point they're still trying to develop into their long-term right tackle to learn from Morgan Moses. But good depth piece, could be there at left tackle if Will Campbell goes down, and has the prototype size that you're looking for. I think this was a smart selection, and not much of a risk either in the 7th round. So then we get to the late 7th round, the Patriots' second to last pick. They take Julian Ashby, long snapper out of Vanderbilt. This is a super smart, high IQ, precise long snapper with a physics degree. So Bill Belichick's presence still remains in Foxborough. Look, we know Joe Cardona has been around a long time, has been very consistent. I don't see him dropping off or anything, but he's not Vrabel's guy. This is probably his long-term replacement. And, if Julian Ashby is not ready as a rookie, to replace Joe Cardona, stash him on the practice squad. Nobody's going to pluck away a long snapper, so have him sit for a year or two, and then eventually he's your long-term guy. Now, could they have signed this guy as an undrafted free agent? Maybe, but, they clearly coveted him. They didn't need to spend a draft pick on him, but they did, because long snapper is something they've always valued in New England, and I like Joe Cardona, but again, he's up there in age, and maybe this is section. I can't speak tonight. I've done so many podcasts these last few days that I cannot articulate anything at this moment in time, but yeah, he will be a good long snapper, I think, for years to come. I just don't know if he's going to beat Joe Cardona right off the bat, but not a bad pick in the 7th round. You stash him for a year or two, or he competes for the job and takes it in year 1. Very good long snapper, best long snapper in the draft. It's usually these guys don't go in the NFL draft, though, but it's a Belichick move that Vrabel and company decided to make. So the Patriots, like I said, they did a ton of moving around. They ended up having the last pick in the draft, a.k.a. Mr. Irrelevant, with a trade I believe they made with the Kansas City Chiefs. They selected Kobe Minor, cornerback out of the University of Memphis, 5'11", 188 pounds. Again, Mr. Irrelevant. Played 3 seasons at Texas Tech, hardly any snaps during his time there at TTU before transferring to Indiana and finding a real role there. Had 0 interceptions last year, unfortunately, but did rack up 38 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. He's a 4'5", 640 guy, so at cornerback, that leaves a little bit to be desired, but this is a guy that's had limited opportunities throughout his football career until he transferred to Indiana as a senior and really made the most of it. So, was projected as an undrafted free agent, but perhaps the Patriots took him as Mr. Irrelevant to boost his confidence a little bit, and, New England showed more interest than any other team did in this player and actually invited him on a top 30 visit. So, you're taking a flyer here, right? But he's coming off a solid season at Indiana, has a high ceiling, also a very low floor. Chances are we'll never see him on the field beyond the preseason, but there is a chance he turns into a real NFL corner. This is an educated gamble with a irrelevant draft pick, so no issue taking a flyer here. Kobe Minor, Patriots' last draft selection. So overall, what is the grade that I give the Patriots for this? I think the easiest way to grade this, the rubric, if you will, is to just go over the flaws that I see, because there aren't a ton of them. I do want to knock a point or two for drafting a runner back early, as much as I like Travion Henderson, but they took Kyle Williams with the next pick, who I would have been comfortable with the Patriots taking early in the second round. So I'm actually not going to knock them for selecting Travion Henderson in the second round, because they got Kyle Williams, who I would have been comfortable with at that point in time. I will knock them, however, for drafting safety Craig Woodson at 106 overall when he was 188th on the big board. Perhaps he would have gone well before then, but you probably could have waited a pick or two to get this safety that you highly coveted. Would consider knocking them for drafting a long snapper and a flyer at corner late in the 7th round, but if they coveted those guys, like, the opportunity cost is minimal taking who you think is the best player available there. So you also risk losing them in undrafted free agency, because then you have to compete with all 31 NFL teams to get Kobe Minor or the long snapper out of Vanderbilt. So, you take them in the 7th round, then you don't have to worry about that. So I'm not going to knock them for that. Really, the only flaw I see is reaching for Woodson. They took the best left tackle in the draft and filled a glaring hole of 6 years. They added dynamic weapons in Travion Henderson at running back and Kyle Williams, a wide receiver who can actually separate. They took an edge rusher and a defensive tackle in the 4th or 5th rounds that probably should have gone in the 2nd or 3rd round. They needed a kicker and selected the best one in the draft, added some depth at tackle, and though I'm knocking them for reaching for a safety, that still is a sneaky need there. I give them an A-. It would be an A if they didn't reach for the safety. This was a nearly perfect draft, in my opinion, but let me know if you disagree in the comments. What grade do you give the Patriots? And are there any players they didn't select that you wish they took instead? And who do you see starting right away? Overall, the players that I see starting right away, obviously Will Campbell. Not Travion Henderson, but he will eventually. Kyle Williams, I do see starting right away. Jared Wilson, I see starting right away. Craig Woodson, on the fence of starting right away. Joshua Farmer, I think, will start right away, depending on Christian Barmore's status. And Braden Swinson, probably not initially, but... And, of course, Andres Borregales. So the Patriots could have found 4 to 5 starters in this draft. Again, rose-colored glasses. They just finished. Chances are some of these players won't work out like we think they will. There might be other players, undrafted free agents, that will work out. But overall, I think the Patriots probably found 4 to 5 starters in this draft. And that's why I give them an A-, only knocking them for reaching for a safety when they probably could have taken him a round or two later. But really happy to see this draft, especially after recent years. Hopefully it plays out the way I think it will. But that's it for this episode of PatsCast. Definitely more coming this week. Of course, there's undrafted free agency. The Patriots have signed, I think at least 16 players or something at this point. So I need to dig a little deeper there on the research. But it looks like there's some real value that they added after the draft as well, so you're not going to want to miss that. But again, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you throughout the week with more New England Patriots coverage.
PatsCast called it big day in town. Will Campbell's here, laying dudes down. Short arms, whatever. The tape is clean. Protecting Drake Maye, building the dream. PatsCast, tough and fast. Stacking the roster, leaving the past. PatsCast, new blood fight. Super Bowl hopes burning bright. Lightning feet, Drake Maye's weapon can't be beat. Jared Wilson, bulldog mean, center a guard, holding it clean. Day one starter, pushing the wall, protection locked, ready to ball. Joshua Farmer, steal of the night. Braden Swinson, ace ripping tight. Seminole power, tiger pride. Depth and force, nowhere to hide. PatsCast, tough and fast. Stacking the roster, leaving the past. PatsCast, new blood fight. Super Bowl hopes, burning bright. Mike Vrabel, building the wall. Tough, accountable, answering the call. Elliot Wolf, forgiving all good. PatsCast marching like we knew we would.